blinks again before he seems to understand what I said, and repeats, "I see. You'll do it." It catches me completely by surprise when he suddenly wraps his arms around me and pulls me close, very close, closer than we've ever been. Hey all you cool creatures, and happy Valentine's Day! Today we are continuing meeting in the flesh, and this time we are going to go down Yiestol's route. So let's read the content warnings again. This game features text descriptions and non-explicit visual descriptions of blood, gore, torture, vor, cannibalism, adult intimacy, and hand-holding. For Yiestol's route, specifically, vor and cannibalism and some blood and gore is part of it. However, because I am playing the PG-13 version, it is all incredibly tame, but regardless, viewer discretion is advised. Now let's go romance a very sweet monster. I jerk awake to the sound of my alarm beetle buzzing. I immediately close my eyes and roll back over, burying my face into my pillow. The desire to go back to sleep is tremendous, which is pretty unusual. I almost never have trouble waking up in the morning, but my limbs still hurt a little after all the sprinting yesterday. My thoughts immediately snapped to the strange talk I'd had with Yiestol, and that certainly wakes me up. I jolt upright in an instant, my drowsiness dissipating like so much smoke. I sit up in bed, scuffing a hand over my face and picking off the pus that's dried over my eye during the night. A cursory check of the time tells me I'm not late, but I should move quickly if I want to be on time, so I do. And I try very hard not to think about the eclipse. I'll have the time to spare for that once I'm actually on my route. Huh? I told you, take the day off. I'd made it on time to work, squeezing past some loitering crowds in the streets, jogging the last stretch of the way to the salt plant, only to find the place quieter than usual, though there was the familiar rustle of salt pouring into filters, the scrape of long poles mixing through vats, and the glop of honey being emptied by the bucket. There were fewer workers than usual. The boss seemed a little less harried than usual too, and when he beckoned me over, he sprang that surprise on me. Delivery roster today's short. He has the delivery list in hand. He flips through the pages, swiftly double-checking each one with a stubby pencil. Turns out a lot of people asked to have their delivery for today put on hold. Heading out of town because of the eclipse, I imagine, or have plans of some sort. Whatever the reason, we barely even have half the usual number of deliveries. He scratches at the scales on his snout with the back end of his pencil. Felt silly making you run all of your routes, so I reorganized the routes. And a few of you have barely taken any days off, so I'm giving you today to rest. Go enjoy the eclipse. I automatically give a dip of my head in thanks, but it still hasn't properly sunk in. I build my daily schedule around my work, and suddenly being told that I have the whole day to myself is jarring. The boss even seems to notice my hesitation and gives me a hard clap on the back. Even if he meant it playfully, he's a strong guy. and that casual whap is almost enough to bowl me over. He laughs as I wheeze. I love our boss. Go on, get. You're young. Go do something fun. You deserve it. You're sure there isn't anything I should be doing? You doubting me? No, sir. Leaving the salt plant empty-handed so early in the day feels profoundly weird. And I'm not quite sure what to do with my hands as I head towards the door. It's almost a relief when the boss calls me right before I reach the door. Right, Bill, hold on a second. Yes, boss? He tromps over, digging through the pocket of his apron and pulling out a few scraps of paper. He returns most of them to his pocket, but holds one out to me. Somebody from the Overlook office came by earlier and gave me this. Said it's for you. Yiestol sent somebody? The boss nods. The piece of paper is neatly folded into a square, and unfolding it reveals a short note written in Yiestol's impeccable handwriting. Vil, I was hoping I could see you today if you aren't too busy. I'll be at the Overlook offices all day. So please visit me if you're able. Please don't worry about it if you have other plans. Thanks. Signed, Yiestol. It's written so politely, which is very much like him. I smile to myself as I fold the note back up and tuck it in my pocket. Something wrong? No, nothing's wrong. Yiestol just wants to see me about something. Hey, boss? Yeah? What are you going to be doing during the eclipse? He smiles, the mask straining to stay in place on his snout. I can almost picture all the teeth he's showing. The boss doesn't smile very often, but when he does, it's very kind. So it's a pity the mask is in the way. I'll be watching the eclipse with my partners while we enjoy a packet of mercury salt together. Mercury salt? That's right. He gives a proud huff, arms across over his chest. Jin thought it was extravagant, but I know Dearth loves it, so I went for it. As if I'll let this special day go by without doing something nice for the loves of my life. That sounds really nice. I hope you have a nice evening. We will, so you should too. I wish the boss a good day and leave soon afterward. I don't want to delay him any further when there's still work to do. Hopefully he and everyone else at the plant will still be able to finish up quickly and enjoy the rest of their days. Though I do still feel some guilt about taking off by myself when everyone else is working hard. I also don't want to waste the time that was kindly given to me. Standing out on the streets, I watch people go by for a few minutes. It's actually not as crowded as I had feared it would be. No doubt a lot of people are traveling, or are already holed up with people important to them. Far down the street, I can see what looks like a small brawl. I guess that might also be something important to the people involved, but I do hope it doesn't last too long. It would be awful to spend the eclipse day in a salt bath. Tugging my cloak closer around myself, I inhale deeply. The air feels electric, stinging at my nose. All right, I guess I should get moving. The streets are abuzz with activity as I head towards the Overlook office. If there was a strange electricity in the air yesterday, then the very atmosphere is crackling with energy today. As I walk past a popular garment store on the main street, the window shatters as a body comes hurtling through it. Fragments of organic glass go skittering in all directions as the defenestrated individual rolls across the pavement, shouting and howling. A second figure comes bowling out of the store moments afterward, landing on the first in a vicious tackle. There's only a short pause before fists start flying as both parties attempt to pummel each other. A small crowd gathers around the fighters. Some people spectate quietly, while others cheer and shout. It doesn't matter if these fighters are strangers or not. They are no doubt engaging in something that matters a great deal to them on this auspicious day. Fights, too, are important after all. This may be a way for them to settle a long-standing grudge. I peer past the onlookers for just a few minutes before continuing my way, giving the crowd a wide berth, just in case. It wouldn't do to get embroiled in a big brawl after all. I've just put the fight behind me when a pair of Overlook officers run past me, shouting for the crowd to back off and give the fighters room. My steps slow as I glance over my shoulder. The fight is still going on, judging by the shouts and scuffling noises. And the officers wave their batons to get the attention of onlookers, urging them to step aside. Of course, it's the Overlook's job to ensure that things go smoothly on Eclipse Day. It wouldn't do for strangers to interrupt a personal fight, or for the fight to involve third parties. It must be difficult. There's so much going on today. Up ahead, a loud shout catches my attention. A small crowd is gathered around a tall figure who stands with arms raised, shouting indistinctly. I think they're announcing something important. The crowd gathered around them seems excited. This too is probably something the Overlook officers will have to keep an eye on. I can see the Overlook spire up ahead, looming above the other buildings. The spire's eyes dart back and forth rapidly. Even from this distance, I can see the spire's flesh pulsing rapidly in spots, frantically pumping blood through its veins. I don't think I've ever seen it so active. Yiestol must be working harder than he ever has. The note he left for me had seemed so candid, but Yiestol always seems to try and seem at ease. I can't imagine this is actually easy, even for him. The fight behind me sounds like it's escalating. The heavy, meaty sounds of knuckles pummeling into flesh echo down the street. But I don't pay them any attention. Instead, I quicken my pace, heading towards the Overlook office at a run. I don't want to keep Yiestol waiting any more than absolutely necessary. Excuse me. My first thought is that the office feels weirdly quiet as I push the door open, which is odd. Shouldn't it be bustling with activity today? And then I realize what's going on. The office is emptier than usual. Some desks look like they've been abandoned in a hurry, paperwork thrown in all directions. Others are manned by their usual occupants, piled high with papers and communication bladders, their tubes crisscrossing the floor like cobwebs. There's a constant, furious scratch of pen tips on paper, punctuated only when a worker grabs a bladder to whisper furiously into it. The communication tubes pulse non-stop, carrying a steady stream of messages out of the office to the Overlook officers on the field, I assume. Doing my best not to interrupt their concentration, I make my way past their desks towards the overlook pod in the corner. So immersed in their jobs that the workers all ignore me as I step over their communication tubes. Yiestol? The eyes on the pod are half-lidded, and it's not until I speak up that they blink open and turn to me. I got your note, but I can come back later if you're busy. There's a brief pause before the eyes simultaneously shut. Then the pod cracks open with a wet, squelching noise. No, I'm glad you came. Yiestol's voice is muffled by the sound of fluid sloughing off him. His exoskeleton sheds the coating of slime easily, and when he brushes his hand over his body, it comes off him in viscous strands, plopping back into the pod's pool in big globs. Thank you for dropping by on such short notice, Vil. It was a rather sudden request, so I wasn't sure if you'd be able to make the time. He bends down to brush the last of the pod slime off of his body, then carefully extracts one leg from the pod, letting the slime drip off of it completely before he sets it on the floor. Then he repeats the process with the other foot, and then his balance slips. Perhaps because of a residual streak of slime, his foot skids sideways as he topples over. Fortunately, my reflexes are quick enough that I can prop him up before he hits the floor or crashes back into the pod. Whoa, are you all right? Yiestol seems stunned for a moment, eyes wide in shock. His gaze slides over to me, studying my face before he gives a small nod. Yes. Thank you. I suppose that could have been dangerous if I hit the floor. Behind me, I hear a worker ask if everything is okay, but most of the others don't even seem to have noticed anything happening. Their focus is incredible. Perhaps that's what it takes to keep things running smoothly during the eclipse. I carefully help Yiestol back on his feet, finally realizing just how exhausted he seems. Without the coating of slime, it's more obvious that his exoskeleton is lacking in its usual luster. His eyes half-lidded as he gingerly rubs a hand against the soft connective tissue near his jaw. I'm afraid I rather lost track of time and I haven't been able to rest in a while. I might be more exhausted than I thought. You need to rest. I keep my voice firm as I look up at him, meeting his gaze steadily. Of course, but my work. Yiestol is clearly distracted, eyes closed as he struggles with his thoughts, but he clearly needs to rest. I need to persuade him somehow. I'll start with the first one, tell him he can't work as well if he's in poor condition. He obviously can't work if he's feeling unwell. If his focus is on his work, then this should persuade him. Yiestol, I know your work is important, but you also can't run yourself ragged like this. Your work is hard. You won't be able to do it well unless you're in good condition. So please rest for a moment. There was also something you wanted to talk to me about, right? Yiestol looks over at me as if remembering my presence, and then he nods. Right, let me get the other one. Say he needs to take better care of himself for the future. He can't just think in the short term. Even if this eclipse is important, he also needs to think of the future. Yiestol, I know your work is important, but this won't be your only eclipse, right? You're our overlook. You'll be looking over this city for a long time, so you can't run yourself ragged like this. So please rest for a moment. There was also something you wanted to talk to me about, right? Yiestol's attention snaps over to me, as if I had said something terribly important. He blinks hard before giving a small nod. Right, of course. He inhales and exhales slowly. I watch the soft portion of his exoskeleton swell with that breath, settling back down as he empties his lungs. After 2 or 3 more slow breaths, he seems much calmer and offers me a smile, his usual smile. You're right, I think a short break would be good. Even though he still looks exhausted, it's good to see him at least acting like he usually does. I can't help giving a small sigh of relief. Yeah, that sounds great. We end up back on the rooftop, beside the dormant spire. It too seems a little strained. The eyes seem somewhat bloodshot as they lazily scan the horizon, and when I gingerly touch one of the protruding lumps of flesh, it feels a little hot. The skin throbs slightly beneath my touch, and I can feel the steady pulse of fluids beneath the stretch of skin. I'm afraid I've overworked it somewhat. Yiestol approaches slowly, his hand running across a large vein snaked over the handrail. It's not in any danger of serious damage, of course. I'm sure I would give out long before the tower ever does. But I'm afraid I don't yet have the experience and intuition that the previous overlooks did. They could often pinpoint sources of danger and commotion, and look towards them more quickly. Lacking that intuition, I have to search the city more frantically in search of any trouble, and it strains the eyes. I apologize. His voice is gentle as he directs that last statement at the tower. The tower is silent, of course. Not that it could ever speak, but without an overlook present in the pod, it doesn't even glance Yiestol's way. It simply quietly gazes over the city, automatically searching for any significant signs of activity. Activity that it's sure to find plenty of. Now that we're on the rooftop, I'm much more cognizant of how unusually active the city is. Here and there, colorful plumes of smoke crawl from between buildings, lit from beneath by flickering lights of fires, celebratory fires perhaps, or malicious ones possibly. To our east, I can make out a large crowd gathering at an intersection. It boils with activity, though from this distance it's hard to make out what the individuals are doing. From all around us, the sound of shouting and cheering and screaming carries on the wind. The breeze always whips away those voices before we can make out specific words. But the impression we get is always the same. Today is a day unlike any other in recent memory. Controlling that chaos must be a gargantuan task. I can't imagine how difficult it is for Yiestol and all the other Overlook workers. Right. Yiestol? Yes. I'd been lost in my thoughts as I stared out over the city, and Yiestol had taken the chance to quietly take a seat beside me. His legs swing off into the empty air off the edge of the building as he looks up at me. I take a seat as I continue. The office seemed much emptier than usual. Did something happen? I assumed it would be much busier on the Eclipse. Oh, that. I'm afraid we lost quite a few workers today. Officers, too. They are individuals after all, with their own priorities and desires. It may be our duty to watch over the city, but it's difficult to place duty above something truly important to you. Say, traveling someplace to meet someone very important, or settling a lifelong grudge against a very bitter foe. Yiestol's voice is steady and soft. There's no trace of ill will or bitterness in his voice. In fact, part of me wishes they were here to help, of course. But another part of me is grateful. It means they trust me enough to look over the city despite their absence. I should have prepared for this in the first place. It was my mistake not anticipating it, so I'm grateful they'd trust in me regardless. He seems pensive. I badly want to comfort him, to make him feel better, but it's difficult knowing what to say. They were right to trust you, weren't they? I'll just have to do my best. Things are going smoothly so far, after all. I passed by some commotion on the way here, but the officers got there really quickly. And it didn't look like it was getting out of control. You're doing a great job keeping the city safe. I suppose I'm holding on so far. But that isn't good enough. He still seems so absorbed in his thoughts. Unwilling to interrupt him, I wait quietly until he goes on. I've managed to avoid any catastrophes so far, but only barely. I've had to claw my way through some tight situations already, and I'm sure things will have escalated while I'm taking this break. I'll have to scramble to catch up once I'm back in the pod. But you were also right that I need to rest periodically to maintain my focus, or else I'm liable to make more mistakes, which would be equally bad. I don't have the experience or composure or intuition that the previous overlooks did. And though they assured me I would soon catch up to them, I'm afraid that won't be the case. Even if this eclipse goes safely, it may be sheer luck. Perhaps this year's eclipse has been on the tame side so far. So if future eclipses are rowdier, if there is more going on, I'd surely fail to keep this city safe. There is a deficiency I need to fix. The outburst is a little shocking. In all the time I've known Yiestol, he's always been unfailingly calm and kind and gentle, thoughtful and composed. Someone who always kept tight control over himself and was sharply aware of everything going on around him. There had always been an ease to him that I'm now realizing I'd been taking for granted. It hurts to think that he's been harboring these distressed thoughts, and I hadn't been able to help him. Yiestol, we never know what will happen in the future, none of us, so I don't think it's fair of you to be so hard on yourself. And I don't think you're deficient in any way. Like the previous overlook said, if you're just lacking in experience, then that'll fix itself as time goes by, won't it? You're not lacking in anything. That certainly caught his attention. Yiestol looks over at me sharply, eyes wide, and my voice dies in my throat. Had I said something wrong? Oh, I'm sorry, Vil. I didn't mean to surprise you. I must have looked taken aback because Yiestol suddenly smiles. It's a little rueful, a little embarrassed, highlighted by the way he touches a hand to his face, finger tapping against his jaw. I was so absorbed in my thoughts I was practically talking to myself. There is something I should have explained first. It's why I asked you to come here after all. I apologize. I shouldn't have hurried to say those things. He seems to calm down somewhat, taking another deep breath before he shifts positions to look at me more directly. Vil, have you ever met one of my kind before? The conversation's not going exactly where I expected it to. Regardless, I give the question some serious thought and then shake my head. I don't think so. Not to my memory. Right, then I assume you aren't familiar with our life cycles either. Probably not. Then please let me explain. It won't take terribly long. Myself and many of the others who have served as Overlook, our kind has always been perceptive. We have always excelled at pinpointing anomalies in our surroundings and addressing them as quickly as possible. Of course, we don't take this for granted. In the long history of this tower, there have been many who have served without being the same kind as us. And not all of our kind are fit to serve as Overlook either. It's a position we work towards and serve with gratitude. Those of us who are selected as the Overlook have always been honored by the position, and pour all of our efforts into doing the best job we possibly can. Because we love the city, of course, but also because we don't want to have any regrets. We don't want to look back at our time as Overlook and think, I could have done better. I could have done things differently. And in that vein, there is something all of the previous Overlooks did before experiencing their first eclipse: bonding with a partner. I understand now why Yiestol reacted the way he did to my attempts at comforting him. This thing he was lacking wasn't an abstract criticism of his own abilities, but something concrete he felt he failed to do: bonding with a partner. I feel slightly embarrassed knowing I'd misunderstood him so drastically, but only nod to show that I'm following along with his explanation. Yiestol continues. You see, no matter how perceptive we are still just one individual with one mind. By bonding with a partner, however, we evolve a step further. We create a deep connection with a second mind and become something greater than a sum of its parts. And you feel like you should have made that bond before the eclipse? There's a pause before Yiestol shakes his head. That isn't quite it. I don't regret having put off my bonding until now. Of course, it might have made it easier on myself to survive this eclipse if I were bonded. At least it would give me peace of mind, knowing that I'd become the best possible iteration of myself before facing this challenge. But I also didn't want to bond before this eclipse because the bonding process would necessitate changing my relationship with that individual. A rather drastic change, and one that can't be reversed. The puzzle pieces are falling into place. I can see now why Yiestol was discussing those hypotheticals the other day. This is what he had been worried about. My worry eases just a fraction. With a better understanding of what Yiestol was trying to say, I think I can better understand his concerns. A drastic change to a relationship. Thoughtlessly, I murmur the words under my breath. Yiestol nods and continues. Yes, one that can't be undone. Because we need to devour the person we're bonding with. I see. That makes sense. Now that I think about it, I've read about individuals like that in the past. They're somewhat rare. Individuals who can meld into another body to become a part of them. Or individuals who can absorb others to become a combined entity. Individuals who aren't complete without assimilating another into their body in some form. It must be a hard way of living, needing to depend on another in order to grow. I nod sympathetically. All right, I'm starting to get what you mean. I guess those hypothetical questions weren't really hypothetical after all. I give a small grin as I say it, and Yiestol responds with a laugh. It's the most relaxed I've heard him sound today, and it eases some of that tension that's been building in my chest. I suppose not. I'm a little embarrassed now, thinking of how transparent that was, but I badly needed to get it off my chest. And it was the only way I could think to bring it up with you. Yiestol looks away once more, gazing out over the city. Someone below us shouts, but we can't see them from where we're sitting, and the words are indistinct. Just one more sound adding to the ambiance of the city. Vil, you're intelligent. I'm sure you can guess what I am getting at. Of course, the air feels electric, like it's filled with sparks that burst around me as I give a small nod. I can't say I'm happy exactly, but I do feel like this is a tremendously important moment. I'm glad. He smiles without looking over at me, his gaze still directed over the rooftops as he closes his eyes. His hand, however, creeps closer to me, fingers extended, as if searching for something. I promptly extend my hand, allowing his fingers to touch against mine. His bones are flawlessly smooth and cool to the touch as they graze over the back of my hand. Then he squeezes my hand just once. His grip is gentle but tight. But even so, it wouldn't do for me to skirt around the issue. I need to talk to you about this in a straightforward and honest manner, or else it wouldn't be fair. It's just that I've never done it before, so I hope you can understand if I seem somewhat nervous. Yiestol exhales slowly before looking to me once more. His eyes are fixed on me intently, the amber of his sclera amplified and almost glowing in the warm light. Vil, you're a highly attentive and diligent person. I've always admired those traits of yours and aspired to be like you in some ways. There's a warmth to you that not everyone has, and it's the same warmth I'd like to show to the city. I respect you deeply. I cherish you. And in many ways it pains me to put you in this situation. The bonding process would bring us closer than ever, Our minds would be brought together as one. We would be able to share our thoughts, our feelings, our dreams with each other with absolute clarity. As an evolved being, we would always be at peace with each other. But there are things we would lose. The ability to touch and see each other like this, for one. And because our lives would become one, there are things you would lose. We would make effort to maintain connections to your old life, of course. I deeply respect the life you have right now, and would never want to take away any of it from you. Not a single bit of it. We would talk to the same people, visit the same places, experience the same things again. But it would never be the same. A bonding process is a big decision, and I don't ask this lightly of you. I won't ask for your answer immediately. I would only ask, Vil, would you please consider bonding with me tonight, during the eclipse? Hearing the facts laid out like this is dizzying, especially when they're coming from someone as usually composed and calm as Yiestol. But because it's him, I can tell this is something tremendously important to him. His straightforward honesty means a great deal to me, and I give a firm nod. Of course, I'll give it some serious thought. Yiestol exhales hoarsely, as if he has been holding his breath. Thank you. I knew you wouldn't be the type to immediately reject it or run away, but still I was quite nervous for a moment. Thank you for listening to me and for taking my request seriously. I appreciate it more than you can imagine. He withdraws the hand that had been touching mine and brings it to his face, brushing his fingers against the corners of his eyes. Already he looks like a tremendous weight has been lifted from his shoulders. And I feel the same, of course, seeing him look so relieved. And hearing that important question from him without the veil of hypotheticals feels refreshing, in a way. We hear a raucous bout of cheering from somewhere far away, the shouts petering off into just a few stray whoops, and Yiestol gives a dry laugh. I suppose that's as good a signal as any that I need to return to my work. He rises to his feet without waiting for an answer, then promptly offers me a hand. I accept it gladly, clambering upright and dusting myself off. I take it you aren't running your usual route today. I noticed you don't have your pack. Yeah, the boss gave me the day off. He said I should enjoy the eclipse. And he is absolutely right. We're heading down the stairwell back into the office, and Yiestol smiles as he holds the door open for me. It's a special day after all. I know how hard you usually work. You more than deserve a break today. You probably deserve that break just as much, if not more. Unfortunately, not today. Maybe next time, if there's a slow day. Yiestol already seems in much better spirits. The break seems to have done him a lot of good, and he stretches his limbs as he approaches the pod. The fluids inside gleam, the unbroken surface practically shimmering in the light. But today I have plenty of work to get done. And with that, he steps into the pod. The fluids well up around his feet, pooling up higher as he begins to lower his body. and I blurt out in a hurry, "Yiestol." "Yes." "Good luck with your work." "You can do it. I know you can. You're going to do an excellent job keeping the city safe, and I'll be back in the evening, right before the actual eclipse. Let's talk then." A heartbeat passes before Yiestol nods. He smiles, though it's seemingly his usual gentle smile. I can sense a flicker of something more in the way he looks at me, a sort of intimacy that wasn't there before, like we're sharing a secret. I guess we are, in a sense. "Yes, I'm looking forward to it. Have fun out there, Vil, and stay safe." The pod closes around him in an instant, the two halves of its flesh shell coming together with a wet sound of suction. The numerous eyes on the pod roll once, as if trying to find their focus, open wide, then immediately go half-lidded. Yiestol must have promptly directed all his focus outside. I'm sure it's necessary. The city must be escalating its activities as we grow ever closer to the time of the eclipse. Everyone else is also deeply immersed in their work, and I walk past them as quietly as I can, careful not to step on any of the communication bladders. Nobody so much as glances at me as I step towards the door. The creak of it pulling open sounds so loud to me, but to them, it doesn't exist. I'm glad such diligent people are keeping our city safe. I end up wandering the streets outside. I need to think about Yiestol's proposition, of course, but I feel like I need to calm myself first, before I can address something so important. So I walk. It feels good to walk. My body is so accustomed to running my daily route that I've been feeling antsier than I realized. And simply taking to the streets at a brisk walk helps me clear my head. My feet carry me down familiar paths, and I let my eyes wander over the various sights and sounds. This is all very, very familiar territory to me, but today, on the day of the eclipse, everything is different. Just a little. Just enough to make me appreciate the city all the more. I walk past a small crowd. They've gathered around one individual who stands tall, arms spread, speaking in a booming voice. Today is the day, my friends. In just a few hours, the eclipse will happen. Good fortune will come to all of us. And so we depart now off into the Bone Plains to hunt the giant earth whale. The crowd erupts into cheers. Several arms are raised high, hands clasped tight around spears. This must be a hunting party. Everyone looks ecstatic, practically mad with excitement. And it's almost infectious. I find myself smiling as I walk by. They say the earth whale cannot be hunted, but we'll prove them wrong. We'll be remembered for years, for decades to come, and everyone will feast on earth whale tonight. To victory! To victory! The triumphant shouting and hollering is audible after I turn the corner and off the street. The park is quieter. Not that it's totally free of the eclipse's influence, of course. I pass by what looks like a couple embracing each other, whispering to each other and giggling. They seem very happy, and I give them a wide berth, trying to pass by quietly without interrupting anything. Elsewhere in the woods, I can hear boisterous conversations and shouts, but all sounds are muffled by the ambiance of the woods. and I look for an isolated spot where I can sit and think. It doesn't take terribly long for me to find a small grove of trees a short distance off the main path, flanking an old, fallen log. The finger pods on the ground squirm as I approach, no doubt alerted by the pad of my feet on the ground. But they settle down once I take a seat. All around me I can hear the chittering of insects and the distant caw of crows. The city's bustle comes from some place even further away, an ever-present but now muted reminder of what's happening today. And, sinking into this relaxing atmosphere, I close my eyes. Vil, would you please consider bonding with me tonight, during the eclipse? It's hard to really imagine what this bonding would be like. But it hadn't sounded anything as simple as being eaten. I've heard of individuals like that, of course, who need to assimilate or absorb other people in order to survive or grow stronger. They often formed bonds with those who had naturally short lifespans, or who were fated to die shortly after procreating. These relationships often seemed short, but passionate, no doubt amplified by the fact that one party would only live on in the other's memories. What Yiestol described, however, sounded completely different. The bonding process would bring us closer than ever. Our minds would be brought together as one. We would be able to share our thoughts, our feelings, our dreams with each other with absolute clarity. As an evolved being, we would always be at peace with each other. We, not I, huh? I won't vanish. I'll still be there. I'll be with Yiestol. I would lose something. A lot, possibly. Things would change drastically. But at the same time, I would gain something. A lifelong partner and a trusted companion. And the city would benefit. Technically, it would be a small sacrifice for the sake of many. But still. Would Yiestol chastise me for hesitating over this decision? Would he be upset with me if I said no? No, I don't think so. I end up quietly talking to myself as I sift through my thoughts. Yiestol isn't like that. That's why he gave me this time to think to myself. And while his request had certainly caught me off guard, his honesty and sincerity had made it much easier to accept. With how passionate he had seemed during that conversation, it was hard to imagine he wanted to bond with me purely for selfish reasons. From anyone else, I might have felt more uneasy about being faced by this decision. But I feel like Yiestol had wanted me to understand the full scope of the situation, and had wanted me to think it over on my own, so I wouldn't feel pressured. This is my decision to make. I think of the various people in my life, my work, the things I enjoy doing, the places, sights, and sounds I've experienced. I think of how my relationship to these precious things might change if I decide to bond with Yiestol. And I think of Yiestol. I think of long days spent with him, at his side, the two of us working together towards a common goal. I think of his calm smile, the gentle cadence of his voice, his calm and reassuring presence. I think of the time I've known him, of how much I've come to respect him and enjoy his company. I think about how it might be to grow even closer to him, to work towards protecting the city together with him. Absorbed in my thoughts, I barely noticed the time go by. It's the rustle of leaves that finally snaps me back to reality, and I sit up from where I'd ended up slowly lying down on the log. The sudden movement is enough to set off the finger pods nearby, and they wriggle unhappily as I clamber to my feet. The rustling turns out to be a small child barging through a nearby bush. The child gives me a confused look, as if demanding to know why I'm here, and I smile in return. Past the dense wall of foliage, I can hear an adult calling for the child. Maybe they're too big to get through the bush. Going around all the trees could take them a while. Sorry, there isn't much to do here. Let's go back, okay? It sounds like somebody is looking for you. The child pouts at first, making a face, but reluctantly holds out a hand. I take the offered hand, tugging the child along gently as I go back through the foliage, the way the child had come. As we emerge from the bush, brushing leaves out of our eyes, the parent looks over with a start. Sorry to surprise you, I thought it would be best not to let a little one wander around the woods. It only takes a small tug at the child's hand to get them to return to their parent's side, and I'm thanked profusely. The child is so excited for the eclipse, I'm told. They wanted to go exploring on this special day. Last time, they had found an enormous cluster of bile flowers in the woods, but had never been able to find again, and they were sure they would find it again today. The eclipse really is a special day for everyone, isn't it? I give the parent and child a small wave as I leave, wishing the child good luck, but suggesting that maybe they explore together. The child, perhaps understandably, seems offended by this unwarranted advice given by a stranger, but the parent, at least, thanks me once more while seeing me off. It feels good to be able to help people. It was a small gesture, one that cost me virtually nothing, but it was still helpful to someone, and that knowledge makes a warm feeling bloom in my chest. Thinking from this perspective, I can get a better understanding of why Yiestol values his job so much, though it might be difficult for me to devote myself to the same level he does. Perhaps it's a goal worth some sacrifice. I think back to how exhausted he had seemed when he emerged from the pod, practically dizzy from the long time spent looking over the city. But at the same time, he had seemed so proud and fond as he looked over the buildings from the rooftop, one hand touching against the spire's long vanes. I look up to the rapidly darkening sky. In the far distance, I think I can make out the very tip of the spire, though it might just be my imagination confusing a wayward tree branch for the spire's top. Either way, I should probably head back. I think it's time. The streets are busier than ever as I make my way towards the overlook. Most people are clustered together in groups, the biggest ones overseen by overlook officers standing at ready in case there's trouble. I hear talk of a romantic confession going well. Someone decides to travel out west into unknown territory and is recruiting mates to travel with them. Another person has decided today is the day they will begin the process of setting up their new business. The announcement is met with cheers. Overhead, the suns have drifted across the skies, seemingly on a collision course aimed at each other. The moon is a darker shape that crawls ever closer, as if intent on devouring the suns. My skin almost feels tingly from the energy in the air, and I find myself jogging, then running towards the overlook office. I want to see Yiestol. I want to let him know of my decision. The Overlook office is even quieter than before when I enter. The lights are off. The desks are empty. The skies outside are rapidly darkening as the moon begins encroaching upon the sun's light. And the interior of the office feels almost desolate. It takes a moment for my eyes to adjust to the darkness, and then I realize the pod in the corner, alone, is still occupied. Its eyes are all closed. Yiestol must be completely focused on the events happening outside. Unwilling to interrupt him, I walk over to the pod and sit beside it. It pulses gently, radiating an intense warmth. Like Yiestol himself, it's an incredibly comforting presence. Just being near it tends to put one at ease. Despite not having run my route today, I find myself starting to grow languid and sleepy. I guess even just walking around and thinking about things is more exhausting than one might imagine. It does feel like it's been a very long day after all. And if it's been a long day for me, it must have been exponentially more draining for Yiestol. I hope he'll be able to take another break soon. Vil? I bolt upright at the sound of Yiestol's voice. I hadn't meant to fall asleep after all. Yiestol is crouched beside me, a hand still hovering over where he had evidently been hesitating to shake at my shoulder. He laughs as I look at him, rubbing a hand on my face. You caught me by surprise. I didn't realize you'd arrived. Were you waiting long? No, not at all. It's just that the pod was really warm and I guess I dozed off. I'm still trying to rub the sleep out of my eyes, and Yiestol smiles fondly. You should have gone home if you were so tired. It's been a busy day after all. Our work here is pretty much done. The eclipse will be soon, and the officers have already been dispatched to all existing trouble sites, as well as standing by where we expect there might be any more trouble. Even the remaining workers here had small things they wanted to do before the eclipse happened. So I let them leave, so it took me a little longer to finish those tasks. Sorry to keep you waiting. It's fine, you don't need to apologize. I'm finally feeling alert once more, and I sit up straighter to peer at Yiestol's face. He still looks tired, but a little more at peace. With all of the work done for this eclipse, he must be feeling tremendously relieved. Not like earlier when he had seemed so stressed. Besides, I couldn't leave. I needed to answer your question. Right. For a brief moment, I see a trace of nervousness return to Yiestol's features. His eyes widen marginally before settling back into his calm gaze, his lips parting to reveal a sliver of teeth. They press together thinly as he nods. Yes, of course. There's the subtle scrape of his exoskeleton on the floor as he moves to sit on the floor, facing me. The remaining light from outside filters through the windows, highlighting his features from the side and glimmering off stray strands of his hair. His gaze feels more intense than ever as he looks at me, not demanding or prying, but patiently waiting for my answer. Despite his earlier signs of unease, his voice is quiet and calm as he says, Vil, would you bond with me? His words have a beautiful clarity to them. They almost seem to echo in my chest, throbbing alongside my pulse. The calm cadence of his voice is betrayed by a focused way he regards me, as if I'm the only thing in his world at that moment. A warm flush of gratitude washes through my veins. Regardless of my answer, I am incredibly grateful that he would ask such a thing of me, though I never aimed for it nor expected to become someone so important to Yiestol. I've always treasured our friendship, knowing that he feels the same way and perhaps to a greater magnitude than I can truly comprehend is almost dizzying. But even as my pulse thrums in my ear, I struggle to reach the final answer. I tried to keep my voice calm and clear as Yiestol's had been, as I give my answer. I can't. I've said it. I can't take it back now. Oh, poor Yiestol. I see. Even Yiestol, as composed as he always is, can't seem to contain his disappointment for a moment, though he quickly tries to hide it. Eyelids fluttering closed as he casts aside. I catch the momentary flicker of something wounded and vulnerable in his voice. And then he shakes his head. When he looks back to me, all traces of that weakness have been wiped away. When he smiles, it seems utterly genuine. I understand. Thank you for answering me honestly, Vil. Still, a strange sense of guilt lingers in my gut. Not because of my answer. I know that my answer was correct. Bonding seems like such a monumental decision, and one shouldn't make such huge commitments if there's any hesitation. I don't regret saying no. But I do regret being unable to break it to Yiestol more gently. I regret seeing him hurt. I'm sorry, Yiestol. Please, don't apologize. Yiestol suddenly reaches forward to grasp my hand, squeezing it tight. Don't apologize. You have nothing to apologize for. It's said more forcefully than I expected, and I stare at him, a little startled as he continues. I know that I asked something very, very difficult of you. Just the fact that you considered it seriously, instead of rejecting me on the spot, means a great deal to me. His hand clutches tighter around mine, and he inhales shortly before continuing, his voice intense. So, you have nothing to apologize for, Vil. I am grateful you gave it serious thought and answered me honestly. Thank you so much. Another apology begins to well up at the back of my throat, an apology that this is the most I can do for him. But I swallow it back. If Yiestol says it isn't necessary, then I shouldn't. Instead, I choke out. It was my honor. Thank you so much for asking me. His lips curve upwards in a smile, revealing a brilliant crescent moon of sharp teeth, and he suddenly wraps his arms around me. The bony portions of his arms dig into me, and his exoskeleton is cold when his chest presses against my shoulder. Yiestol's body is neither warm nor soft, like the pod had been when I was leaning against it, but it's comforting regardless. I can feel his breath whisper past my skin when he exhales slowly. You're very kind, Phil. In some ways, I'm glad you said no. It would have pained me hugely to hurt your relationship to anyone in any way. I'm sure a lot of people would have been terribly sad to have their relationship to you so suddenly changed. Despite what he says, he squeezes at me tighter for a moment, his next breath puffing hotly against my shoulder before he continues. I'm so grateful I had this chance. His fingers grasp at my cloak just for one moment. Then he lets go, slowly sitting back and giving a small sigh. His gaze is downcast at first, his lips slightly parted as if there's more he wants to say. Words don't come easily to me either. There's a great deal I want to say, but nothing seems as important as just being present in the moment, and letting Yiestol know that I am here for him, despite my final answer. And that seems to be enough. Yiestol squeezes his eyes shut very hard for a moment, then shakes his head. When he looks to me, he's done his usual look of calm once more. It's not perfect. It's more vulnerable and soft than usual when he smiles. But he's trying so hard to appear his usual self that I know I shouldn't pretend otherwise. Vil? Yes? Maybe it's a bit presumptuous of me, but... Could I possibly ask you for one more favor? Of course, what is it? I hope we can still be friends. I feel a sting through my chest. For Yiestol to have to ask that, he must have been genuinely nervous about requesting a bond from me. I sit forward as I answer without any hesitation. Absolutely. You're still someone I really respect and trust, Yiestol. His eyes glimmer when he smiles, as if a warm gloss is coating his sclerae. I'm glad. I'm really glad. Your friendships come to mean a great deal to me, so I'm very grateful not to have lost it. His lips part to say something more, but a sudden loud cheer from outside interrupts us. It's only then that we realize it's growing much darker and very quickly. The eclipse. It must be close. I hurriedly grab Yiestol's hand, pulling him along with me when I get to my feet. The bony portions of his feet tap along the floor as I drag him along towards the door that leads to the outer stairwell. Come on. Let's go watch it outside. I want to see it with you. Right. He hurries to fling the door open, and we dash up the stairwell as quickly as we can. We both automatically look to the skies as we burst onto the stairwell. Without any, visors? The skies are starting to grow darker, as if the suns are intimidated by the moon's impending presence. The streets below, which had seemed so noisy and bustling with activity mere seconds ago, very rapidly goes quiet. It feels wrong just to move, and I have difficulty tearing my eyes away from the stairs. But I force myself to hurry up the stair, tugging Yiestol along. Trying to go up the stairs with my head craned upwards means I almost trip, of course. I stumble, and Yiestol is beside me in an instant. Are you all right? He's whispering for some reason. When I respond, my voice also automatically comes out as a whisper. Yeah, sorry, I'm fine. Let's hurry. Even with a smattering of clouds dotting the skies, It's easy to pinpoint where the sun is starting to be swallowed up by the moon's shadows. Slowly, slowly, those dark shapes creep over to cover a little more of the sun's gleam. We reach the rooftop just as the moon completely devours the sun's light. It feels like something heavy and large, larger than I could truly fathom, is bearing down upon the city, like we're being stared at by something huge and awesome. Other than the thin ring of light fighting past the moon's shadows, the sky is completely dark. An oppressive silence has taken over, allowing the sound of my own pulse to echo in my ears, and I exhale roughly. Beside me, Yiestol also stares up towards the dark skies. Our hands are still intertwined. All around us, the city is deafeningly silent. Out of the corner of my vision, I can make out other people sitting on rooftops or leaning out their windows, heads craned back. All eyes are on the sky, witnessing the way the sun's light barely seeps past the moon's overwhelming darkness. Beside me, I feel Yiestol's fingers squeezed tight against my hand. He doesn't look at me, and I don't look at him. Neither of us are able to look away from the incredible sight looming over us. But his quiet murmur cuts through the silence like a knife. Thank you for witnessing this with me. I'm not as strong as him, and I can't bring myself to speak, but I squeeze his hand back, and I know he understands me. I feel the same way. And with that, the moment is over. The moon begins to recede, the sun's light slicing through the sky in splinters. Our surroundings are speckled by pinpoints of light, and a murmur rises from the crowd. The voices only grow louder as the light continues to expand, growing from needles to ray, then the full intense warmth of the sun we're so familiar with. The eclipse is over, and with it goes the overwhelming tension that's been building in the city for the past few days. Below us, people begin speaking eagerly of what they just witnessed, sharing their hopes and wishes now that the main event has passed. They hope the big decisions they made today will soon bear fruit, but nobody talks of wanting to take any further action. The moment has passed. Yiestol and I are both quiet as we descend the stairwell, and it's not until we enter the office that Yiestol speaks up. Vil, I'm afraid I'm starting to reach my limits. I look over at him and realize how exhausted he looks. He must have expended every last reservoir of energy to keep himself composed until the eclipse's conclusion. And now that they're all spent, he can no longer maintain the pretense of composure. Right, of course. Do you need me to accompany you anywhere? Where are you going to rest? He tilts his head towards the pod. It's customary for the Overlooked to rest in the pod after an event like this. We enter a deep sleep for several days. I'll have to leave a great deal of the work to my colleagues during that time, and I may not be able to see you, but it will ensure we're back in good condition as soon as possible. I see. I won't keep you any longer then. Please rest well. You did an amazing job keeping the city safe. I'm sure everyone's grateful. I know I am. I hope that's the case. Thank you. Yiestol steps towards the pod without any further hesitation, and I take that as my signal to head towards the door. Have a good night, Yiestol. He's just started sinking into the pod's pool of fluids when I pull the door open, and he raises a hand to give me a small wave. His fingers seem even more slender than usual, delicate, and spindly, like a tree's smallest branches. It's incredible to think that those hands hold so much responsibility, protecting the entire city. His voice is muffled past the walls of the pod, barely comprehensible as he calls out, "Good night, Vil. Thank you." The pod squelches shut without fanfare. The eyes don't even flicker, remaining firmly shut. I close the door as quietly as possible, then head home. I walk home slowly, feeling the day's exhaustion start to catch up to me. Though my delivery route entails a lot more walking than I did today, I feel oddly drained. When I do get home, I collapse in bed and fall into a deep, dark sleep. I dream briefly of sinking into the fleshy interior of that pod, feeling the pool of warm fluids close above my head. It sticks to my throat and my nose when I inhale, flooding my lungs. 36 eyes gaze over the city, blending together into a single dizzying view that takes over me. Is this what Yiestol does every day, watching over the entire city like this, all on his own? I don't know if I'd be able to do it alone. Yiestol is strong, for sure, much stronger than me. But I'm sure even he must feel lonely sometimes in there. I hate this decision. I snap awake to the buzzing of my alarm beetle. I get dressed, eat some salt, head out to work. I say good morning to my boss. I ask how his eclipse went. He says it went well. He asks how my eclipse went. I smile and say it went fine. As expected, it's the other Overlook workers who greet me when I visit the office to make my usual delivery. Some are gone, having used the eclipse as an opportunity to travel far away or make drastic life choices. But other familiar faces remain, greeting me with polite smiles as they count out the salt packets I have for them. It turns out Yiestol already prepared for this, too. Several days' worth of delivery orders have already been written out in his neat handwriting. I feel a pang of fondness every time I look at those orders, then over at the dormant pod. The days he spends asleep feel more like weeks. Our friendship remains, of course. He's as kind and calm and gentle as ever once he emerges, well rested. The fact that his first eclipse as Overlook went so smoothly is a huge boon to his reputation. And soon, Yiestol is utterly beloved by the entire city. Of course he is, that's the way things should be. So I know I shouldn't be too surprised when I visit his office one day and am greeted by an unfamiliar figure. It's Yiestol, but also not him. His shape has changed into something taller, sturdier, more graceful. I stop in my tracks when I first open the office door and see him. Not because I'm surprised, but because his very presence is arresting. And even before he explains it, I understand what happened. This magnificent sight before me is what Yiestol has evolved into. He must have found another person to bond with. I'm happy for him, of course. How could I not be? Simply being around him makes it clear that Yiestol is incredibly happy and at peace. There's a new, calming aura around him, and conflicts seem to melt away before his fingertips. Under his renewed watch, the city has never been safer. I am happy that Yiestol found someone who was willing to make that drastic change with him. And sometimes I find myself wondering if I made the right choice. But I try not to dwell on that thought. There's nothing I can do about it after all. All I can do is go about my days with the knowledge that someone genuinely kind and gentle and strong is protecting us. I am grateful to have the friendship of someone like him, and I hope he also still cherishes our relationship. End. Bad end. Kind of. Non-romantic end. Alright, let's go back. Alright, give my answer. I will. I'm almost startled by the words that leave my mouth. They pour out before I can stop myself. But as I comprehend what I'm saying, I also understand that this is the right choice. The words come faster, spilling forth my true feelings. I want to bond with you, Yiestol. I want to be together with you and help you. I see. Yiestol blinks. Is he shocked? He blinks again before he seems to understand what I said, and repeats, I see. You'll do it. It catches me completely by surprise when he suddenly wraps his arms around me and pulls me close. Very close. Closer than we've ever been. His body feels warmer than it looks, too, when his exoskeleton presses against my chest. Fascinating difference. Yiestol's head bows, almost touching my shoulder, and I can feel a deep exhale whispering against my throat. It's a little shaky. Thank you so much, Vil. I can't put into words how much this means to me. His fingers tug into my robe and he pulls me even tighter. I'm pretty sure I've never seen him this emotional, nothing even close, and it truly drives home how important this is to him. I gently rub a hand at Yiestol's back, or as much of his back as I can reach. My palm ends up awkwardly touching somewhere between his side and his shoulder blade, feeling the smooth expanse of his exoskeleton. You don't need to thank me for anything, Yiestol. I was also really glad you asked me. I know it's an incredibly important decision for you, and if you feel safe asking it of me, then I'm really honored. Even with the way he pulls me close, I can feel even closer if I close my eyes. I can feel his breath against my skin, the wiry strands of his hair brushing against my cheek, the way his grasp pulls my cloak taut around me. I feel enveloped in his presence. It's very comforting. We've known each other for a while now, haven't we? We have. And I've always felt really comfortable around you. I always thought it's a good thing that you're the Overlook, because I know the city will always be in safe hands with you around. So if I can help you and be with you, then I'm really glad. There's no one else I'd rather do something like that with. Yiestol doesn't respond, but his head nudges against my shoulder, almost like he's nuzzling me. He stays that way for a moment before finally pulling back a bit. One arm pulls away from around my shoulders to touch at my face, gently brushing some of the hair out of my face. You don't know how happy it makes me hearing you say that. He leans back in, this time to touch foreheads with me. Stray strands of hair slide against each other with gentle metallic noises when he leans back once more. I can't wait to bond with you. The smile on his face is as gentle as ever, but there's a closeness and a warmth to it that feels different. It feels like he's truly addressing me as Yiestol, the individual, rather than as the Overlook to the city. I beam back at him. His gratitude and joy are infectious, and there's a hot feeling fluttering in my stomach. I'm excited too. There's more I want to say. It feels like a dam has broken, and there's an endless number of things I want to say. But before either of us can speak, a loud murmur from outside catches our attention. It's only when we look away from each other that we realize the skies outside have suddenly grown much darker and they only continue to fade. The eclipse. It must be close. Vil, come on. There's a light tap-tap of his feet against the floor as Yiestol gracefully gets to his feet, holding a hand out to me. When I take it, he pulls me up in one go. Let's go watch it. But shouldn't we bond first? Yiestol laughs. It's a very light and joyful sound. He continues to pull me along without hesitation, headed towards the door that leads to the outside stairwell. Bonding takes a while, and I know superstition dictates it's best to make our important decisions before the eclipse actually happens. But we already made our decision, didn't we? Technically speaking. And this will be our first time seeing an eclipse since we got to know each other. So I want a good view. Something I'll remember forever. I guess I can't argue with that. With that said, I pick up the pace. All the weariness I had felt earlier seems to have melted away at some point. I feel like, as long as Yiestol is pulling me along, we could go anywhere and I wouldn't feel tired. Of course, we don't go very far at all. We only hurry up the stairwell, up onto the roof. The streets all around the Overlook office are cluttered with people. Most are gathered in small groups. Some are overseen by Overlook officers. The rooftops nearby are also dotted with people looking to get a good view. Others peer out windows or climb up the numerous poles. The electric energy in the air is practically palpable. Yiestol and I stand near the spire where the numerous eyeballs languidly sweep across the horizon. Is it also aware of what's about to happen, I wonder? And, as if in response to my question, one of the eyeballs swivels straight upwards. The suns seem so much brighter as they start to converge. Even with a dusting of clouds marring the skies, their light feels warmer than usual. Perhaps it's the proximity between them that amplifies their light. Perhaps it's a trick of the eye because we're not used to seeing them traveling such a direct collision course. Perhaps it's just our excitement that heightens every emotion in the moment. Regardless, we watch the three suns creep closer and closer. I find myself holding my breath without even realizing it, and it's a cry from below that has me exhaling sharply. Someone on the ground below screams in what sounds like euphoric pleasure. Another person joins in soon afterwards, but most of us are quiet. Especially when the moon begins to cut through the sun's warm light, I feel a ripple travel through the crowd, through the very atmosphere when the moon's shadow first bites into the sun's glow. Seemingly uncaring of the effect it's having, the moon marches slowly onward on a direct path to devour the entirety of the sun's glows. Yiestol stands perfectly straight and tall beside me, gaze directed upwards. But his hand reaches out, as if searching for something. My hand. As soon as I take his hand, his fingers squeeze tight around mine. It's happening. His voice is only a quiet murmur, but it still feels terribly loud. The only sounds I can hear now are muffled whispers and murmurs. The very air feels oppressive and heavy, like it's weighing down upon our throats, and speaking at the moment feels taboo. So I only nod, squeezing tight at Yiestol's hand. We don't look at each other, but we're at least very aware of each other's presence as he continues to gaze upwards. The warm glow of light above is at first a half circle, then a crescent, then only the slimmest sliver. And then there's only the ominous ring floating above us. A perfect, delicate circle of sunlight that majestically adorns the dark skies, like an eye watching over us. The very air feels heavy in my lungs. My chest feels tight. The eclipse bears down on us at an overwhelming presence greater than any of us will ever equal. And it makes my skin prickle. It feels physically impossible to tear my eyes away from the skies, even as the tiniest pinpricks of light begin to pierce past the moon shadow. But a gentle tug at my hand pulls me away one step, then another. The suns have begun to fight their way out of the moon shadow when I finally manage to look away. Come on. Yiestol still speaks at a whisper, though. He glances back briefly to give me a smile as he continues to lead the way. We go back down the stairwell, of course, through the door that leads into the office. The streets below seem to have also broken free of the eclipse's allure by now. I start to hear murmurs and shouts drifting up towards us as people rejoice in what they had the chance to witness. An overjoyed scream is the last thing I hear clearly before I shut the office door. The office is instantly quieter, the noise from the street seeming to come from a million miles away. There's just the sound of our footsteps as we walk across the office and towards the pod. Is it okay for me to come in? Yiestol had stepped into the pod without any hesitation, but I can't help hesitating. The pod is the Overlook's domain, after all. I'm not sure if the pod can even hold the both of us. But Yiestol just laughs, gently, not mocking. He keeps a steady grip on my hand as he ushers me to step in beside him. Of course, anyone that I acknowledge is allowed to enter the pod. And besides, it will have to learn to recognize us once we're bonded. So doing the bonding process within the pod is a useful method. My predecessor highly recommended it. I see. Even with that encouragement, entering the pod is a strange feeling. The fluid inside is lukewarm and thick, but the surface parts easily as I begin to dip my foot in. My legs glide in with practically no resistance, and when I stand with both feet in the pod, the fluids close up around the circumference of my limbs. Here, come closer. Yiestol's bony arms rest over my shoulders, easing me closer. Fluid sloshes around our calves, lapping at the open edges of the pod, but never spilling over. Should I take off my things? Yes, if you don't mind. A small nod as I begin to undo the fastenings of my cloak, letting it drop to the floor. And as soon as I am bare, Yiestol suddenly wraps his arms around me, pulling me into a tight embrace. When he drops his weight down, I'm brought down along with him, and together we sink into the welcoming pool of fluid. The roof of the pod snaps shut with a loud squelch, sprinkling us with flecks of fluid. But the interior of the pod is somehow lit with a warm glow. Submerged in the pool of liquids, I worry for a moment how I'm meant to breathe. But I'm given my answer soon enough when I feel the fluids begin to subside, as if they're being sucked back into the pod. My head breaks through the surface, and I gasp. Inside the pod, the air tastes warm, with a deep sweetness to it. Not like sugar, but like meat. I'm still inhaling deeply, trying to grow used to the sensation. When Yiestol's head also breaches the surface, the level of fluids continues to shrink down, sinking below our shoulders. Don't worry, the pod will adjust to us. It'll make sure you're comfortable. As if to prove his point, he sits back, tugging me along so I'm seated in his lap. The fluids slosh around him, and the plush wall of flesh behind him conforms to the shape of his back. Sitting this close to him, I can feel his exoskeleton start to grow warmer. Not just his exoskeleton, but the very air feels hotter and wetter and sweeter. It feels like I'll melt if I stay in here too long, like I'll become a part of the pod. It's making my body feel oddly sensitive, and I shiver as Yiestol's hand traces down my side, then rests against my back. His fingertips are two hot points of contact against my skin that demand a great deal of my attention. But far more pressing is when he brings his face close to mine. "We are so cute, Vil." His voice echoes in this tight space, sending the tiniest ripples running across the surface of the fluid pool. The level of fluids has sunk further down, lapping around our sides, warm and comforting without being imposing. Yiestol was certainly right in saying that the pod would make me comfortable. I feel utterly at home here, in Yiestol's warm embrace, feeling his breath brushing over my shoulder. I close my eyes, meaning to nod, but feeling too pleasantly absent to do so. Yiestol seems to get my meaning regardless, because he leans in closer. His words are spoken in a low whisper, each syllable melting into my thoughts when he asks, "Can we begin?" Almost before the question drops, I know my answer. Yes. Well, I hear the slick sound of something wet against something hard, like blood sluicing off bone. And I very quickly realize it was the sound of Yiestol's mandibles spreading wide open. For a moment I catch a glimpse of gleaming white teeth at the periphery of my vision. Then they sink into my shoulder, like the way my feet had eased into the pod's fluid without any resistance. Yiestol's teeth slide into my flesh smoothly, with no pause or hesitation, so swiftly that I barely feel the initial puncture. Only when they lodge deep into my flesh I feel a prickle of pain sparking through my nerves. But even then, it feels hot and airy. It's not unpleasant at all. My flesh parts easily, as if the pod's fluids have melted away any resistance, partially liquefying it. Then I can feel the trickle of hot fluids from the bite mark trace down my chest, pattering into the pool around us. It leaves behind a trace of flickering warmth that lingers on my skin. I want to feel more of it, that warmth. My hands wander practically on their own, starting from Yiestol's side and traveling upward. My fingertips touch against Yiestol's body, feeling out details I'd seen before but never thought I'd get to touch. The gentle inward curve of his exoskeleton above his hips, the softer connective portion where his arm meets his shoulder, the partition line near his throat. Just below his throat, his exoskeleton opens up to a window where his inner flesh peeks past. It's shiny in the warm, hot air of the pod, and I touch the edge of it as gently as possible. It still earns a deep shiver, and Yiestol's mandibles snap shut quickly enough that his teeth rake thin lines across my throat. The sensation sends a heady rush of blood through my veins, and I exhale sharply. My voice escapes with that hot lungful of air. It's a soft noise, but a needy one that echoes in the tight confines of the pod. Yiestol says nothing, responding with a low purr from the back of his throat. It makes his teeth vibrate ever so slightly as he takes small bites into the junction of my throat and my shoulder. Everything is starting to meld together. The sound of the fluid lapping around us, the feel of teeth easing into my arm, the pressure of Yiestol's hands dragging down my back and below my rib cage. His fingers squeeze tighter, pressing against, then into my sides. My body gives to his every touch, made pliable and sensitive and eager by the sweet air and the lap of fluids. It doesn't take much encouragement from him for me to raise myself up onto my knees. It lets me lean closer into him, pressing chest against my chest. That tiny window of his inner flesh feels incredibly hot against my skin, enough to earn a low groan. I want to be closer to him, closer than anything else. So close we become one. I want to be bonded to him. And my body responds easily to these desires, slowly succumbing to Yiestol's every touch. As if guided by magnetism, he finds the spots where my body is most prepared to take him. Teeth glide into my throat with the ease of a knife through water, his hands dragging hot lines of sensation across my skin and making a heavy sensation settle in my gut. He shifts beneath me, and then pulls me closer until there's practically no boundary between us. My hands grip tight around Yiestol's shoulder, pulling him closer. I feel immediately like our bodies have become one, like a rib cage without a spine. My body would collapse in on itself without Yiestol's form to hold me together. His exoskeleton is hot and slick to the touch. The pod's fluids have soaked through his hair, and the strands practically welcome the tangle of my fingers through them, just like my body continues to welcome each and every breach. Faintly, I hear Yiestol murmuring my name. His eyes are closed, his movements gentle as he nuzzles against my ribcage. His teeth ease apart my skin, and I shiver as his teeth scrape across bone. I can't feel my legs anymore, like they're not there anymore, replaced by a warm sludge. That hot, heavy feeling in my gut keeps expanding, spiking hardest when I move to pull him closer to me. Through the haze of light and sparks that are starting to color my vision, I feel my fingertips starting to melt, smearing against Yiestol's shoulders. It's good, because I can sink even deeper into Yiestol's lap this way, feeling him sink deeper, deeper, deeper into my most innermost recesses. My heart's almost beating out of my chest, and I gasp when Yiestol murmurs my name right against it. I say his name back, but I'm not sure if my voice can leave my throat anymore. It's starting to become a bit too much for me. The heat's continued to rise, but not in an unpleasant fashion. It's not like the sweltering heat of the summer or the stifle of a hot blanket. This is the heat of a warm embrace that one sinks into endlessly without escape. When I close my eyes, I can feel every little movement against me, the drag of Yiestol's hands up my back, and the way it presses his arm against my spine. The way each hot breath flits past my bones and through my rib cage, the bob of his throat when he swallows, and the faint vibrations whenever he murmurs my name. That hot trickle of the pod's fluid is everywhere now, covering me like a silk cobweb. I've never felt more comfortable. I know for sure that I made the correct choice in bonding with Yiestol. How else could I ever feel so at peace? When I close my eyes, I can hear a single heartbeat pulsing between us. Yiestol is still calling my name, and I smile. I'm very glad it's the last thing I hear as my thoughts grow fuzzy and dark, It's a full day before I awaken. I am aware of it immediately. There's no transition, no period where I'm hazily emerging from sleep, just the overwhelming darkness of sleep, followed by instantaneous clarity. Because Yiestol was awake first, and as soon as I'm awake, we share everything we know. We are one and the same, so I immediately understand that the bonding process was a success, and that he had awakened first but had been reluctant to awaken me, because he was sure I was exhausted. And he also immediately understood that I was grateful for his consideration. Even bonded with me, he is kind and considerate, and I am immensely grateful for it. Well, we turned out very pretty. It takes me no time at all to adjust to being bonded. Yiestol had been worried the change would be too drastic. Perhaps I simply adapt quickly. I do find it strange at first, occupying a form so different from mine. Our evolved body is closer to Yiestol's old form than mine, and at first I'm confused by the willowy fingers and delicate limbs. They're so unlike my own robust limbs, hardy from long days spent running. But at the same time, it's nice, getting to know all these intimate details of Yiestol's body for the first time. Nobody will ever know him better than I do, and nobody will ever know me better than he does either, now that we're bonded. He also immediately understands what my body had been like, and commiserates with my difficulties. Then he helps me adjust until I'm comfortable once more. It's a shock to people who knew me before, of course. Our relationships do change drastically, in a way that can't be reversed. As the Overlook, I can't maintain the same position I did before, delivering salt. But it's not a bad change either, just different. I can still speak to them, ask how they're doing, inquire about their daily lives. I still cherish each and every one of them, the same as before. Perhaps even more, now that we want to protect the city together. As the Overlook, we think so dearly of the city, and do everything we can to nourish it. The city responds in kind by flourishing more than ever. What makes us happiest is neither the bustling city nor the peaceful streets, nor the friendliness of other people, however. We adore those things, of course. We're deeply grateful for them. But what puts us most at peace is the knowledge that we have each other. Yiestol is me, I am him. We are always aware of each other, together, but separate, at complete peace with each other. And each time we stand on the rooftop of the office and look out over the city, we remember the night of the eclipse, the night that brought us together. The eclipse was only the first of many to come, but it will always be the one most meaningful to us. The end. Wow, that was an interesting experience. That was very sweet, even though I'm not, into vor. But yeah, wow. What a wild ending. I'm sure they're all pretty wild. But I am going to leave this here. I have been recording for a very, very long time. In fact, I'm sure you can hear it. So if you made it this far, thank you all for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. And if you did like it, please hit that like button. And if you want to see more of me but you haven't yet subscribed, please subscribe. I upload videos every Monday, Wednesday, and Saturday, as well as extras and shorts randomly throughout the week. I also stream on Twitch. My schedule is always fluctuating. But, if you want to see me live, come and check Twitch. And I hope to see you all next time. Bye!